Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, 248. At the table with me is
Yvonne Ozerets.
And a regular, Norm. What's your name this week, Norm?
Dave Anderson, still.
Dave Anderson. Always first in the alphabet. You got to go with those A's, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good at graduation.
I remember teachers years ago, they used to hand papers out based on, if you had the highest score, you got your paper handed back first. And Anderson with a 98, Ozerets with a 97. I'd be sitting back there, and Smith with a 62. They don't do that anymore. What was the name of the coach for the New York Giants? Bill Parcells. He was so funny. Talk about jockocracy and chirping. Only time you got a 98 is when they took your temperature. Decided to do a terrible job introducing Anderson, but let's say this. He's from North Dakota, so this would work if you're from North Dakota. Anderson, you want to go to heaven for the weather, or you want to go to hell to visit your friends?
Interesting pick. Yeah. Well, I mean,
I do remember some of the guys at your wedding. They're going to go straight into pearly gates just on charisma alone.
One of them's already there, unfortunately.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. Good guy. He was probably the one you remember.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about Brookhaven? We should do a commercial for Brookhaven. We don't really introduce you with the credentials and the praise that you're worthy of.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing place. Been there for almost 32 years in October, and from a tennis player or tennis coaching, if you're in the profession as a coach or as a player, I mean, I think it's just a incredible playground to go to every day. A lot of courts, a lot of players of all ages, all levels. Great programming, activities for everyone. Coach Andreas is doing an amazing job with our social media and doing this channel. And I don't know enough about it. He just films it. And today we walked around and just kind of did a little bit of a, traveling around the club with a microphone on and some of the stories. I mean, there's been just some incredible memories that he stirred up today through this little interview, and all sorts of just amazing journeys that have been through there. Not all the people end up like an Ashland Kruger. Some of the kids, are lucky to get to a very small college, but based on where they were and their athletic ability, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I truly wake up, with kind of an attitude of gratitude every day when I'm headed in there in the morning in the dark, and can't wait to get there each day.
You've done a great job, your staff over the years, but it's just has such a great vibe. I mean, it's like a little tennis city with Brookhaven. But one thing about Brookhaven is, for the listeners, you can go there if you're a beginner. One thing I don't think many people realize is, Canadians as well, here in North America, Mexicans, but definitely a bunch of Americans, they're going to academies in Europe. And you have to apply, and you get in based on your UTR. I mean, that's the supply and demand. And then, right away, it's like, okay, that means you can, for the most part, just get in line, talk about camps. An academy to me is a camp. It's an instructional program. So, the hot spot to go now is Spain. 2 is France. For a long, long time, seemed like forever, it was Florida. But if they accept you based on your level of play, that means right away you can just do live ball drills. There's not going to be like, let's film your forehand and backhand, and let's see if you have the skill set to, because you have people, okay, what's your goal? You just know if a kid's flying across the pond from the US of A to Spain, they want to become a tennis player. With But yeah, we talked about camps. Let's go with themes. The old Lombardi, be brilliant with basics. With Yvonne's outline for the ITA video, Matt Clore is helping with that with the USTA and national coach, actually senior manager, coach education, analytics. I think I have it.
Yeah.
It's his title. And Dave Secker with North Carolina State. But we have a list here. What is tennis? The tennis court, the parts of the racket, information on grips, body balance for basic strokes, checkpoints for the forehand side, checkpoints backhand side, checkpoints for the overhand serve. Solo, it's so important to teach practice. Solo practice, partner practice, form and target tournaments, footwork and fitness, and peer teaching. But yeah, I think a theme, you could just go with different academies from the past. What's their tag marketing? What are they going with as far as what's their product? You see that a lot with programs. Hit a billion balls, drill, versus drill till you drop. But let's just why don't you each come up with a theme, and we'll go forward with these things like the tennis court and body balance. What's a theme that you could say from a marketing standpoint? You're going to sell a tennis camp. While you're thinking, Dave, as well. Welby Van Horn, learn tennis you'll never forget. That's a good one.
Well, you mean themes of places, Steve, that have been in existence? Some of their
in the past or current.
Well, when I think of like Hopkins, I mean, it was, and a couple of kids from up in my area when I was a kid went down there, and they had the resources to go down there. I mean, their theme was incredibly hard work, long hours on the court, and hitting a million balls, with hard fitness. And so, I don't know that from an instructional standpoint, anything really differed from what we were doing, even up in North Dakota. But I think that just the sheer hours and the intensity, and Hopman's was one of the places I remember that was very big on a 1-on-4 ratio. One coach / counselor feeder, whatever it was, to 4 kids, which, I mean, that concept, that was like that was a private lesson in my world, having 4 people to a coach.
And with Mr. Hopman, the adults, it was the same program. I always just said they should have an ambulance right next to the court. With one person picking balls up, and then they did all sorts of 2-on-1s. Mr. Hopman was if you go on YouTube, and like Vic Edwards, who helped Yvonne Goolgar, she wrote in her book, she didn't like doing all the shadow swing at the beginning of practice, end of practice. Mr. Hopman would do that, but for the most part, he was working with really high-end players, obviously being in charge of the Davis Cup team. With, Vic Braden.
I'm actually partial to the classic, the one we use quite often, fact-based instruction for long-term development. Yeah. I think that's phrased very well.
With, Braden just calling his camp a college and Vandermeer his a university. Certainly you have to do the fine print so that people can navigate, like, okay, what program should my kid be in? And one question, just asking kids, what is tennis? I remember a club up in Boston years ago, Longfellow. And they may have had 50 ways to answer that. What is tennis? Why is a kid going to tennis camp? Fun, sport, exercise, friends. But we start with core information, and we teach the parts of the racket. That goes pretty quick. Racket head, racket face, edge of the racket, throw of the racket, butt of the racket, grip. We teach the grip. And, we say system, there's an organized way to teach the grip. And you have to have a grip sticker, and you have to number the grips. it never worked for me. Like, this is where the V goes. I mean, this is number one. The righty's going to the right, lefty's to the left, base knuckle to index finger, heel pad. That's all. If people want to look at our online content, going through the realities of the court, teaching that. And then when you do that, it's, you have, say, at a camp, you have repeat. Someone's there. They were there the first week and now they're their second week. Is just be clever, break them into small groups. And that's where peer teaching starts right away. It's okay, go teach what you remember about the realities, the dimensions of the court, the math of the court. That's how Braden would start all his programs. The court's 19.1 degrees wide. In the middle, 19.6, doubles 24.2, and on. With this is something that should be mandatory. Is Welby Van Horn body balance? It just takes minutes. Diagonal pivot, diagonal step, body at 45, anchor foot, adjustment foot, and you just go through that for each stroke. People find all that within our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. Obviously, Welby's book is online now. Mm-hmm. Ed Weiss wrote that great book, free book for our listeners online. With, solo practice. Last time we mentioned Tyler Junior College 9-month orientation, and filming a exit video, post video, and the results were impressive. But then if they're not taught to practice, so when the parents would come in, we would do a demonstration and then preach, missionary zeal for practice. But let's get into strokes. I guess with the form tournament, target tournament, the form tournament with checkpoints, hit, hold. Beginning tennis teacher, I just remember years ago, hold your finish, freeze, play statue, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, hit, hold, correct. The beginning tennis teachers need to do all that, but then have the students start correcting one another. But people have asked us to do this. Let's go with volleys. Yvonne, what do you want to say first?
Yeah, volleys are neglected. And going back to something that was mentioned as a theme last time, is that coaches teach the way they were taught. They weren't taught volleys, or let's say they weren't taught efficiently. They weren't taught maybe even at all. So, they just repeat what they've been taught, and they don't really go into the depths of, understanding that the strings have to be aligned to the target. The ball is going to go where the strings are pointing. If you go down, grip determines the angle of the racket face. Angle of the racket face determines the angle of the racket path. Coaches need to understand that. And once they understand that, they really can't go back. Because now what's quite often promoted is continental grip on both sides. You don't have time to change your grip, which is a myth. You do have time. If you have time to turn or even take a step, you have time to change your grip. And then the swing path has to go down. Then you float volleys, and it's more of a defensive shot. You can't really feel confident. And then your game's built around that. So with volleys, they're not taught, and if they are taught, they're most often taught inefficiently.
Go ahead, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, to me, the best way to teach tennis is to start from the green zone and work backward. And, that's not a concept I created, Steve. That's something I probably stole from you. But if you, when we spoke about camps earlier in a podcast, and, if you can initiate tennis teaching from the net and work back from there, you just have a higher success rate too. And getting people to understand that, the racket face, the control of the body, the balance, there's less moving parts in order to get the racket right and have some success. And I think Vandermeer was a master of that in the time that I got to, observe. And, it's just pushing motion. The body coils, there's a diagonal forward pivot and the racket face getting square. I think that what happens is a lot of the debate that we, get into with people that maybe are on the outside looking in. It's a debate that happens because of not really dealing with stage development and where somebody is. It's yeah, but what about yeah, but and if you look at where people are at the moment of impact and just take that 4 millisecond event and okay, how did the racket face, align square to the target right there for that brief moment, and then take the point of origin, the ready position, and how do I go from that to that contact point in a very efficient, effective manner. And grips have such a big factor in that. The weaker the grips, the more excess movements there's going to be. And, it was interesting when we did the Easter Bowl kind of recap, because the number of, there's some kids that look like they've been well taught off the ground, and you can tell that whether they're visual learners or what, they've really gotten close. But boy, can you tell on the backhand volley when people have been taught well or not. And most backhand volleys are a liability, especially if they're above the waist. I mean, many of these kids, I'd say a majority of them volley better below net level because of the liability in their stroke. It's more conducive to below net level. But it's almost hard for these kids to poach from the ad court and cover the center because of the liabilities they have in their grip and their foundation on the backhand volley. And I think that if people could, just see, that's why there's such a merit in going to a two-handed volley early on, to allow the player to learn to get that racket face square. And it doesn't mean they can't work on a one-hander as they do that. But, Mason Vaughn's only a year and a half out of transitioning from a two-hander, and he still uses it. George Goldoff uses a two-hander many, many times to square up the racket at the net when he's being blasted by 75 miles an hour. Racket's got to get nearly vertical to the target, and weak grips sure make it hard to get there. They can get there, but they make it really hard to get there.
Now, for our listeners, Mason Vaughn, he's held a number one national ranking earlier age groups, but George, I believe he had that ranking in the 18s. Good players. Novak in the ready position. Last week we talked about, form tournaments and putting up posters. What do the pros look like? Dave, you remember that large office I had, just like we could do in this room, right below the ceiling level. It was Chris Everett, Vilas, Lendl, Berg. And back in the day, it wasn't like we were even thinking about putting that in social media. Didn't exist. But we used to just take photos from tennis magazines. Just take a photo of the photo, and very powerful. I think showing people where the pros are at the impact point. And again, they can't violate physical laws. But I think the lessons for camp: athletic skills, tennis skills, but also even before that is cooperative skills. And today with electronic gadgets, the first thing people should do, and really at all levels, is we're going to teach people to catch and throw. I know I'm going to be going to the NCAA tournament here. There's rounds of 64, 32. Really good tennis players. But really good tennis players, it's amazing. Most of them can't throw a ball very well.
Yep.
And we're working with one player today. Doesn't really throw very well. But if you don't do it from an early age and you don't do it properly, but tossing underhand, throwing overhand, but can you catch a ball? Can you toss underhand? And with volleys, your two power sources are the speed of the incoming ball and the movement forward. The speed of the incoming ball, if someone's tossing the ball at 1 mile per hour, they're basically getting 50% of the pace from the incoming ball. Kids should be able to have, we say, okay, human ball machine, get a buddy, toss underhand, hit and hold. And then you can add some movement to it where they're service line in and going forward. And no, for sure, you already said it. Young kids should, from the get-go, practice that one-handed backhand volley. But you have a better chance of developing a one-handed backhand volley early on by hitting a two-handed backhand volley. And then I always tell kids, when it comes down to if you are playing two-handed, you're going to use a volley pattern to steal aces. With young players with grips, no such thing as a perfect grip with the least amount of adjustment. Certainly on the forehand side, to have a player volley when they're really young with the base knuckle heel pad on the third panel, so it's an Eastern forehand. Vandermeer used to say is that once a kid's strong enough to hit a spin serve, they can go towards it's a key word, towards a continental grip. The top players don't say what they do or do what they say for the most part. I mentioned it before in this podcast. I like listening to Andy Roddick, but he mentioned about grips. I'm from Nebraska. I don't do grips. And, the marquee coaches or the marquee players, celebrity coaching, if you will. I think Joe Public thinks that, okay, they're teaching them some secrets. It's like when Lendl started working with Zverev. He asked Federer, what do you think Lendl will do? He goes, I don't know. I don't really know Lendl. He goes, I'm sure he can help him out, but he's already 3 in the world. So I don't think that Joe Public realizes that, they're not really teaching technique. I think also that impact point you mentioned, you can't violate physical laws. Where's the racket face if they hit? And, just the language, body on the forehand volley, body at a 45-degree angle, bent to bent, rackets up at a 45, bodies at a 45, head in front of the anchor foot. So initially it's really something you want to stay away from is when you're on a tennis court, there's instruction going on and the coach puts 2 players on one side and 2 players on the other side. That's not going to work if they're beginners. They just start trying to volley back and forth. A lot more progress if you really have I don't really like the term salesmanship, but you can sell it. Like, okay, if we can't get you to toss under and catch a ball, we're not going to be able to get you to play tennis. With different type balls, the foam balls are great. Because a lot of the kids, when they're really young, they're afraid of getting hit with a ball. Of course, volleys transition into other shots. Lost arts, like a conventional approach shot, conventional approach volley. And how you set up for approach shot, how you steal the ace on a return serve. Dave, go ahead on volleys.
Well, I did a video analysis today on a player, and I think the wording is very true of what you just said in that, the volleys are the gateway to the rest of your game. And in terms of learning to play, an underspin, a flat shot, learning to disguise a drop shot, learning to have an efficient return of serve, learning to have a kind of no-frilled backswing on your ground stroke in an era where, an inverted racket head has become kind of the food of choice. Just to have that concept where, and I just think that it's just such a sound way to get people to hit the ball better. It's just clean up their, if somebody came in for a typical forehand or backhand, really not the backhand as much, but in today's world, when they come in and want to clean up their forehand, I mean, inevitably, it's probably better to start them at the net and, make sure that they're just making clean unit turns, setting the racket cleanly for the volley, and then just keep coiling and let the racket circle, because it's just such a critical foundation piece to the entire game. And, I think you always mention golf, and golfers want to learn to play with all the clubs. And Rory McIlroy, who just won the Masters, I am not a golfer at all, but I know he's had wedge issues his whole life, and his wedge nearly let him down. It almost cost him the Masters again down the road. So whether that's just scar tissue, maybe he's even cleaned it up, but, it could just be emotional scar tissue from his past. But, yeah, I mean, just, the tidier people can get their games. I mean, I think we all find that in what we do, if we were math teachers, we're seldom teaching addition in what we do, through the course of the day. We're really teaching subtraction. We're just eliminating excess in people's swings to make them simpler, more repeatable.
Yeah, begin with the volley. This is a Texas story. I was fortunate to go to the Roddick Tennis Academy, and the famous player Leo Lavalle, obviously he had wins over top players. He was, I would guess he was top 50 in the world in singles, but he beat legends of the game. So world-class player. So I'm asked to help this girl. Coaches are all watching. I asked to help this girl with a backhand ground stroke. So I fed her a few balls, and then I said, come up to the net. Then I started helping her with her volley. And then I was interrupted. We asked you to work with her backhand ground stroke. I said, I am. So, I just did the drills where the racket heads up, and all you have to do, you turn, you change your grip straight in your arm, you turn the rackets up high, you just keep on turning, in relationship with strokes, in relationship with spins. So on a very short period of time, got her to hit the ball really well. And of course, Leo Valle, a world-class player, the tennis teachers for the most part don't have that background. So I would say that he's pretty secure in his own skin. He just yells out, it's official. It's official. We don't know what we're doing. And no, there are so many similarities between the volleys and the ground strokes. On the forehand side, to give people range of motion, forehand ground stroke, you'd have people turn with their racket on edge. But you don't want to really do that on the forehand ground stroke. Not only because people are using a different grip today, they're certainly going past the third panel. But you want them to have options, so they're waiting in the third panel. But if a person puts the racket on edge, they separate their hands. When they go forward, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So they end up having too big a backswing. But every day, if a kid, this is for camps, but if a kid leaves a lesson and they haven't worked on every shot, granted, we can go, there's 40 plus shots. You get into basic shots and specialty shots. Pitfalls of the volley. One is kids run around their forehand volley. Excuse me, they run around their backhand volley. They want to hit a forehand volley. So their body mass is not moving forward. With choking up on the racket initially. Vandermeer would have people put their fingers right behind the racket face and just, it's palm guidance on the forehand. It'd be the thumb on the backhand. It's knuckle guidance. But yeah, they have to work on it. Getting people to warm up. I was doing a Spanish drill today where you come up and you just touch the volley and then you move backwards and just brush the forehand. I told this kid from California, I said, you can't do the drill. You hit the ball too hard. They're just, one player is up at the service line volleying. Up at the net. The other player's on the service line. So you hit your volley and it's a live ball. You move back and you got to hit your ground stroke and then you move back in, back and forth, back and forth. And I said, well, if you want to make the drill work, you got to have gears. You can't just have the death grip and trying to be hitting every ball Mach 10.
Yeah, I'd say another pitfall would be on the volley stepping before the swing. You get a swing step together because the energy goes down, racket face will go down, greater chance of the ball hitting the net. One thing to circle back was one of the best drills I've learned from you, Steve, was you were talking about your sons and how they learned to throw and how you got them to throw, grab a ball of socks, and who doesn't love throwing balls of socks at each other? It doesn't hurt. And before you say, yeah, you can throw this ball of socks at each other, but before you do, tap your shoulder 3 times. And that motion gets the palm to face down. And recently, we have players coming in and these 2 brothers recommended the same thing. He's like, hey, okay, you go back home. You both have palm up motions on your overheads. One on the serve as well. Okay, do this drill. Just for fun. Have your palm stay down, and it helps a lot. One other thing to conclude with volleys. The fact that you can hit a 70-mile-per-hour volley at sea level and the ball will still be in. Gravity will take it down. And then I tell that to players and I say, when's the last time you saw a 70-mile-per-hour volley? And they would say, I've never seen one. And then you just pull up a video of Sampras or Edberg, or even before, Laver, you can see, and they crack volleys. And it's because they play a different game style. I mean, they go to the net. That's how they play. So they have the experience. But also you can just see stills of Edberg on the backhand volley. That racket face is square. He's going from his shoulder. He's going through the volley. The racket path is not going down. And it's a good way to kind of sober them up in terms of volleys can be an offensive weapon rather than just a weak point in their game.
With tennis camps, phone ball fight. That's fun. Might have to separate the boys from the girls because might get out of hand. You have to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. I used to do this at camps with have a point system for water balloons. And at the end of the camp, myself included, all the coaches would be sitting on a chair on court. And then the students could throw the water balloons at every coach they wanted to throw them at. And they were into doing it right. They were into winning water balloons. And it was, the last day of camp, it's like, okay, you got 8 coaches filling up water balloons. You got laundry baskets. And, Dave, why don't you go on pitfalls in the volley?
Well, everything's tied together. And in an era where, volleys are often more of a liability than an asset, it's compounded by the court position. And so I think that, it's one of the advantages to teaching from the net back is getting people familiar with what is true net position. And, a slight flaw, I've seen some great volleyers that succeed at the net well, but not necessarily because they were the cleanest volleyer, but because they were in great net position. They had great instincts up there, and they covered the net well. And so I think it's tied in. And I think the pitfall is the amount of repetition that people get from the early stages. I mean, you go to any tennis court, and it seems like a tennis lesson begins with the forehand, and it really needs to be altered by us in the industry. I mean, we need to make sure people get enough exposure on it to where the comfort level is growing, and then people, when they do get to actually get out and start trying to play some points, et cetera, they know that they have that option to go forward and gain the instinct. Because if you don't get instinct up there, it really won't matter what your technique is. You have to have the courage to get in.
Up here in the mountains, it'll be our third summer, and 16 clay courts, 4 at the bottom of the mountain, but 16 clay courts is a healthy number. And looking to have a new director start shortly. We want to have the UTR tournaments and PTT tournaments. And the nice thing is that it's 75, 80 degrees up here in the summertime. But what I'm getting at is squad training. So Yvonne, we're not really, I think it would certainly be like that this summer. We have, coaches that are coming and bringing kids for a long period of time. And, but they just have kids come in for like a week, and we're going to go to town working on helping them rebuild their game. It can be a lot more fun if you're doing squad training. But Yvonne has looked at so many matches and kids that don't get past the service line. Red zone, yellow zone, green zone, we've dummied it down and explained it different ways, ward law, building, forcing, ending. I love that line. Try to miss in a point any situation. You can do this with, you get more advanced into a camp. Win a point off the volley, you get 3 points. If you're up to the net and you lose, you get 1 point, but you flip it on the baseline. You make an error from the baseline, it's a -3. One bounce singles, one bounce doubles to get people to come in. I do think one thing and we're criticized for that. We're criticized more and more. That Nick probably Terry would say, that means you're doing a good job. The more critics you have, the better. But just teaching basics over and over and over again. And Chet Murphy, the late Chet Murphy, I was fortunate to spend time with him and have his books. His brother Bill, they both wrote a number of books. But I haven't researched this, but by memory, what is a drag volley? What is a snap volley? What is a touch volley? With a swing volley. That all has to be practiced. But first, it's just like someone who runs around their backhand to hit a forehand. Well, yeah, that's okay, but why don't you first get a backhand before you do that? I think you definitely need to teach court positioning, how people play in the backcourt. They get themselves so far back, and they're not even on the, like say Djokovic. He hits a lot of backhands, a lot more backhands than most players. Teaching kids, we can get into that, teaching people specialty shots and emerging shots, but it all starts by teaching fundamentals. Let's touch upon this for a second with volleys, how to put fun in fundamentals. Yeah, go ahead, Ivan.
I think first thing that came to my head was introducing competition to technical training. And the first drill that came to my mind was you put two players, they're in the alley, and the alley is a representation of the tennis court. We have a coach, total package coach, Coach Healy. He's been on the podcast many times. And the way he describes how he goes about talking to new players is quite interesting. It's very logical and step by step, and you get this aha realization moment that he always enjoys and shares, where he shows a photo of 3 tennis courts without the doubles alley, and one's pretty much a rectangle, pretty much a square, one's a smaller rectangle, and one's the actual tennis court. But the player doesn't know that, and Coach Healy says, okay, so which one do you think is the tennis court? And they either pick the square one or the middle one. They almost never pick the one that actually what it is, because it's an illusion. The tennis court's 3 feet short of being 3 times longer than it is wide. So the alley is a great representation of, okay, you want to get the ball in the alley, your racket better go through the alley. The racket better track out towards the target. So the drill is you're in the alley. You have one player. Okay, you're drop hitting the ball. You're dropping the ball, hitting the ball, and it has to land in the alley on the other side. If you make it in and your opponent doesn't, you get a point. Vice versa. If you both make it or you both don't make it, you don't get a point. You play to 10, and you can also go up and down that way. And that's just one example, first thought that I had of introducing competitiveness, which is often linked to fun, because it's like, oh, I want to beat you, to technical training.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I think we're only limited by our imagination when it comes to that. And I think that as coaches, teachers, we need to have a lesson plan and a script and then we have to, to me, the fun and fundamentals really comes in a large part from how we present it. And, you can only dress things up so much, but, as a coach, I think we have to bring the energy and the passion and show it. And, the simple task of putting a cone up and, last man standing drills where it's just one line and you have to come in and, punch the forehand volley cross court into the near quadrant to where the cone is to stay in line and things like that. I mean, it's just doing a little bit extra homework as a teacher and a coach to to trick the people into the learning. And it, I think one thing, I learned many things, but one thing in particular is, if you do a little bit of movement with things too, get them tired and then make them do static. And, you just got to be very clever in how it's presented. But, the fun really begins when people start to get better. And so every lesson, as teachers, as coaches, we have to get people better. Ultimately, they have to get on the court, get better. They have to learn. And like you said, we have to have a missionary zeal to get them to practice. But to do that, we also have to teach them how to practice on their own with partners. And the fun kind of happens. It's like learning to play an acoustic guitar. Holding your fingers here, there, and learning to pluck the guitar isn't much fun. But when if you ever do stick with it and get to sing a song, it'd be pretty cool.
With tournaments, okay, we're going to just have a one-shot tournament. It's going to be forehand volleys. You're in till you miss, and they just have to hit the ball in the service box. And we're always telling people 13.5 by 21. You can put a couch, 2 corner chairs, a coffee table, big screen TV. So a lot of things it's the size of a living room. We're going to feed the ball 30 miles per hour. We're going to feed it right to you. And it's amazing how fast it can be over. Someone has a strong continental grip, they'll have their elbow in. Then obviously if it's a higher level group, you just feed the ball Mach 10. And then, so everything needs to be taught. I think it's a real myth that, just figure it out on your own. McEnroe's always saying that, just play sets. There's so much truth to that. Hey, you do have to play. You got to figure things out. But, if you're hanging on the racket improperly, if you don't have the ready position, you're not in the position to be ready. But just having people put the racket in their stomach and just toss right at one another and show them the range of motion that you have on a backhand. I tell people, if you're running around your backhand volley and jamming yourself with your own elbow, it's okay now, but you're not going to play doubles at a high level. And you're developing the wrong instincts for the volley. And it gets locked in. It's like, well, no, you can change it. The longer you go, the more difficult it is to change. I think live ball where you can get 2 people on half a court, say, okay, feed the ball, hit an approach shot. But we were doing that today with a ball machine. Girls really needs to work on inside out. We got the ball machine coming at a diagonal at a good speed. So now it's very difficult. The challenge is it will be incoming cross court to go down the line. You better get it at waist level. You better be swinging it away from your body. And then on the other side, have a young boy coming in who's a lefty. He's hitting the backhand volley each time. And she's worked with our students, and she's doing really well. But her backhand, and again, starts like a volley, turn. She hits the backhand much better in that drill situation than she does when she plays because she's looking to run around her backhand. And then what to do with the backhand. And because the backhand's a liability, I'll just slap it and go to the net. And she's just the opposite of most kids. She does an amazing job, really good athlete, service line in. She did well in the beep test today. The ball goes overhead, she can hit a tweener. But I was telling her, I said, you're not going to get to the volley if you can't get through the return. You can't get through the ground stroke exchange. You can't get through the approach shot. You're not going to get the volley. You want to get to the point where you don't have any holes in your game with how to start practice, how to end practice. The cleansing of strokes. Braden used to always say about Kramer. You'd win the match, you'd go in, stretch, shower, get something to eat, and you go back out and practice. Just going back and practice slowly. I think that's really gone away where people do that after a match because your technique will break down. That's what your opponent's trying to do. How about the shopping store of volleys? Let's go with Dave, what do you think? Kids who get on YouTube, who should they be looking at?
Well, we talk a lot about players of the past. Just did a thing on that last week and gave people 4 or 5 names, and it was a list. We made a list of all the former world number ones at 73, and it was interesting after the fact, kind of going back after the room cleared out, and we talked about Edberg and Sampras and some of the players that we wanted them to watch in regard to that. But there's fewer to choose from in this era for sure. And what Yvonne was saying about people coming forward and really sticking volleys. The way that so many of these people are playing, they're not really conventional approach shots. They're forcing and moving the opponent off the court and then using dump volleys into the open court. And it's kind of misleading to the kids and, the people that are observing it. But, I loved watching Edberg volley. From an athletic standpoint, I love watching Rafter, just in terms of not necessarily the cleanest, but I think one of the most athletic. Pete was amazing, I felt like, and I don't know the stats on it, but I sure felt like Alcaraz, the first year he broke onto the tour, was coming forward a whole lot more than he is now. And it'd be fun to just, if you had the data on it, but, he was going forward. It seemed like in that freshman year that he came out on the tour, it seemed like he was at the net every point. But when you don't use things, I think that they get rust on them. And Draper, I think, certainly goes forward well. I don't think it's necessarily that he's exceptionally clean, and he could go forward more, I think. But I think you have to kind of go back in the archives a little bit to see some players who really execute it well and made it a legitimate part of their game.
You say the same thing about Ben Shelton. Great competitor, great spirit, big time serve. But yeah, you could simplify the volleys. Tim Henman is another person that you could mention for sure. With going back in the day, Tommy Paul, it was reported just here in recent times that he started watching film of, you mentioned Rafter, Sampras, Becker, Henman, how they're going in. Tommy Paul, TFO, Fritz, all world-class tennis players, all had a top 20 ranking. They're practicing with Matt Clore. Trying to think, TFO's younger, he called Matt SCL, Singles Clean House, because you play those guys. It's like this guy can play. But they're playing butts up. And then Matt's a real quiet, humble guy. They're rotating every time, so you get a different partner. And they ask Matt, why don't you ever lose in butts up? And you said you guys don't have backhand volleys. You need to work on your backhand volleys. Isner, I mentioned before, Query, they enjoy their podcast. They beat themselves up, self-deprecating, big time servers, big time reach. But why was not the backhand volley not so good? So the tennis camp, we can go on, you can teach the volleys, well, you can teach doubles. For us, the highest form, I should say the lowest form, where do you start to teach doubles? Is we say, throw, catch, hot potato. You toss underhand, you're catching two hands. Obviously those drills aren't played anymore. Kids would be at a picnic and they're actually playing catch with a hot potato. People have fun of a few different ways today. But that's how you start people playing doubles. And then you take 2 players on one side with rackets and 2 players on the other side, and it's not all 4 players. You're not going to take little kids and have all 4 players playing doubles. It just, mercy to their impulses, slaves to their habits. but it has to be very, very controlled. And what you said, though, okay, let's break for some physical exercise. Let's make sure we're doing some things for fun. When you do play Habitate, okay, one person with a racket, one person catching. You can make technical drills a relay race. It could be, 2 against 2, the partner, the person hitting volleys, and the person tossing. How many can you get? Boom. That's where a coach should have a stopwatch. Or you get so many kids in a line, hitting targets. So you said to put a cone down. But the idea of building drills, but certainly it takes experience. It's an art to make sure you're doing the right things at the right time. And I do think that when people say, okay, you two come over on this side, you two on this side, and kids are doing live ball, that's where you're better off with cross training. You're better to, okay, we've got soccer balls, we've got basketballs. We are working on athletic skills. So you really want to slow the tennis down. There's no microwaving tennis. I think young tennis players should be playing pickleball in the sense that use your tennis skills. I mean, it's the wild, wild west. It's the 70s. They're making it up as they go along. We do that up here at the resort as we, don't do it very often, but I'm not saying play every day, but the kids have fun with it. A change is as good as the rest. And you can do drills within pickleball, certainly using the spec rackets, because that makes it more of a bridge sport. You can't close in. You get to the kitchen and there's a lot more swing volleys. But we have some old people up here like myself. I mean, they might as well have a fly swatter the way they're swinging at it. They're having fun. I like how Sock calls it wiffle. I couldn't hit a baseball, but I could hit a wiffle ball, especially when they got a bat that was as big as a watermelon. But let's say a few more things about volleys and we can check off this part of helping people with tennis camps. You got to be able to demo, show and tell. You have to be able to demonstrate what the volley looks like, show the volley. Vandermeer used to say, sense of accomplishment. You line the group up. So if, say, it's right-handers, they can turn and they can, everybody's watching how they hit. Okay, everybody go to the other alley. Now we got to watch the left-hander. But you just toss underhand. It's a skill. If a tennis coach or, say, a summer camp instructor, I'm going to toss the ball to you, and if you can put it right back in my hand, that's a skill. When people come up, they have a partner tossing to them. They have to come up and ready position, elbows out. You just say the word basketball, or the younger kids volleyball. They really have to. They should be able to put a basketball between their butt cap and their belly button, and it has to make sense. It has to. Like Doug Cash said, which we were flattered by, that if someone looks at a court where they're using the training that we've assembled, he can tell. It's got to look like tennis in the end. But let's wrap it up on volleys. Go around the horn one more time. What do you got, Yvonne?
Well, progressions. Dennis Vandermeer, progressions for the forehand volley are great. For example, you start with body balance. Okay, this is how the body moves. Then you get into the checkpoints. This is the grip. This is the swing path. It's a pushing motion, as Dave mentioned. You get into basic drills. You go to the wall. Okay, it's a linear path. You go to the net. It's the rackets going along the net tape. You give some imagery. Okay, it's like a loaf of bread. You teach the grip. On 3 for really young tots, and for between 2 and 3 composite grip made of 2. So you can still get rack face slightly open on lower volleys. And then you progress through A to B great, which is a drill where 2 players are at the service line. They run in. One has a racket, one does not. The player with the racket turns. Then the tossing player underhand has a target. They aim right at the racket. Step, hit, hold, analyze. And run backwards to the service line, 8 and switch to the forehand side, backhand side. Young players should be taught 2-handed backhand volleys and 1-handed backhand volleys. They both need to be worked on every day. And then you can progress to drills later on down the line that promote and get rid of the fear of coming up. Dave, coming up to the net. Dave had mentioned, having courage to come to the net. One observation over the years is when we do Vic Braden's favorite drill, rat-a-tat-tat, where two players stand at the baseline, they feed the ball up high down the middle. Two players rush into the net, volley. Their targets the opponent's chest, and you're just going right at the other player. What you'll observe is the players that aren't very comfortable at the net, they'll stop. There's a moat around the net for them. It's like they just won't cross it. It's usually where the green zone starts, so it's unfortunate. They don't get the benefit of the angles going from 30 to 130, let's say 3 feet from the net. So they just stop at GVP and they just volley from there. Whereas the drill, you just keep going. You just get closer and closer, and eventually someone misses or you get really close. And it gets you accustomed to the speed of the ball and getting close to the net. And so overall progressions at some point your strokes are going to deteriorate, especially if you're coming from an old swing path or an old grip. And that's where you find the balance. Okay, I'm not so good when I do live ball. Let's do more static training. And that's how you progress. You just find that balance and you get better and better.
No, thanks. A wall, for listeners, in that racket face square to the wall, the fence, the back curtain, that's a wall somewhere in your house. If you could listeners, you get a copy of, in fact, I have quite a few Braden books. I was sent literally hundreds of books from the Braden Library, but I have a lot of copies of Teaching Children the Vic Braden Way. We need to get organized and just give those out as prizes. But that he shows that drill, just doing it straight on, doing it to the side, using the fence. And when kids are on a tennis court, hey, go back to the fence, make that a station within a station. In other words, different ways to use teaching aids, taking the racket head put it right on the net and dragging the racket right across the net so you're not chopping down. So Braden's drill, the favorite drill, that rat-a-tat-tat, where they go right at each other. I'll tell you, my least favorite Braden drill to do as a player, and back in the day, was four corners. You're at the service line. You come in, hit a volley, and you have to come back, touch one corner, go back. It'd be a random feed, but it's just fast turn because you got to move. It makes you move in on a diagonal, makes you move in. With this, I would say our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, it's a long one, 25 hours. But coming back to Dave's Instagram, right now, I think to fight ignorance has got to be constant content. And that's because there's so much bad information going out but actually it's like you said earlier, Yvonne, not too many people are even talking about the volley. It's all, I think it begins and ends with a forehand. Go ahead, Dave, volleys.
Well, I think to the coaches that are listening out there, it could be parents too who are assuming that role of a coach. I think if in a typical session, 90 minutes, if you were to take the initial 15, 20 minutes and just that is going to be devoted all the time to developing the volley, I think that the cumulative effect is going to be very powerful. And I think that volleying skills being particularly rugged at this point in tennis around the country, I think it also is not just a reflection of coaching information, maybe not being totally on point, but also the lack of athletic diversity. So, if you have young kids, being able to teach them just really a lot of athletic skill drills. And, I do love, as Yvonne said, Vandermeer's graduated length method is progressive teaching or progression-based teaching. But, just the Braden palm guidance, knuckle guidance, and being able to do all these little things but I think and the lesson wouldn't have to be the same in every 20-minute session, but I think if the first 20 minutes were just devoted to volleys and simple hand-eye coordination drills and those kind of things, I think you'd notice a huge improvement in the players over time, and I think it'd be a lot more enjoyable for them. And I think that you have a much better chance to get people to play all-court tennis down the road and certainly be able to play more complete double.
No, thanks. Prevention of injury. So they're not playing from the wrist, they're swinging from the shoulder. A few days back, a group of Canadians here, and there's kids from other places as well, but we did one bounce doubles for a long time. So you mentioned work on your volleys. Spin the serve in, no poaching, return, everybody comes in, volley. And, when people become better at it, like you said, Dave, they enjoy it more. Here's a story for you. Shout out to Donald Dell. Donald Dell was mentored by Vic Braden. Donald Dell, let me get that right. Donald Dell and Vic Braden were mentored by Jack Kramer. So PBS in the 70s, it was a fourth TV station. There was NBC, CBS, ABC, and PBS. PBS, no commercials. So Vic was doing these 1-minute commercials. But Donald Dell is the one that made that happen. So Vic had this opportunity to do, that's how he entered everybody's living room. And, that was the beginning of the snowball as far as getting information out. And he did so much with the science of tennis. So Donald Dell's daughter was here for a second time, Christina, good tennis player. She played at Yale. So I'm talking about the volley. There's some adults in the room. We're doing video. And I said, anybody here work for the government? No one raised their hand. I said, the volley is like working for the government. You don't have to do very much. And not to get into politics, but I'm going to guess that Donald Dell is still a Democrat, and his daughter's a Democrat. And because I remember him working with Bobby Kennedy. He had a lot to do with his campaign way back when. And she said, "You sound like Elon Musk." So anyway, there's a story for you. The volley. I do believe. Actually, we have a mom here. She's a lawyer. She works for the Canadian government, and she said, "Well, that's true. There's a lot of people with the government that could do a lot more. That's true in every walk of life. But as tennis teachers, I'll just end by saying this: we need to do a lot more to improve how we teach the volley." But let's do this as a review with the tennis camp. And I would say this is Brandon Flanagan. And there were several. Cheyenne Hawk. There's so many people. I mean, I'm going to forget a couple, but for 12 years, the Harvard camp used our curriculum. And Chad Berryhill. But what Flanagan did is he went through the 365 clips of Tennis Intelligence Applied. And for the camp, it was like, watch these 40. I mean, there's like a short 5-7 minute lesson on how to begin teaching beginners on the forehand. And, it's just buried. A lot of times people will look at that content and, they'll see it's not the crispest. What would you say? It's not high tech. The quality
up to date. It's
not up to date. There you go. With it's old school. But within that, I don't think that someone who's being trained to be on a tennis camp staff needs to necessarily, they're going to be teaching beginners. They don't have to get into how to chart a match, how to go through statistical analysis. But you should definitely be able to teach the ready position. You should be able to teach the unit turn. I think one thing to mention on volleys, I know it's on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, Dennis Vandermeer's footwork. Where you just turn and take one step. But, initially says no step, turn, take one step, side. This is just for the forehand volley, side step, step under, 2 steps. But the best way to be hitting a volley is like you're coming out of the starting blocks on a diagonal and you have all these, and you can just hear the footwork. Sounds like a basketball floor. You're taking all these small little steps and then one volley. And what you say, Yvonne, is it's a trick question. Do you step and hit or hit and step? And then if people get their racket face square at the hit and they're moving forward, the sound of the hit. I ask kids this all the time. They give the wrong answer. I said, what do you do when you're playing against someone? What's the best shot you can hit when you play against somebody with a Western forehand? And they'll slice, keep it low. No. You get to the net and you drive a volley. And then because the trajectory keeps the ball low. A lot of times when people slice, they're hitting a float slice, and the kid with the Western grip moves up and does okay. Last thing, Dave, how's your volley? You moving? You're going to make a comeback? You're going to play some age group tournaments?
Yeah, definitely. Going to try to hit the Wilson Worlds out in January, out in the desert there, and
you haven't done
played
that.
well.
You've been too wrapped up in your players' games. You haven't really done that, right? Or have you done some?
No, I mean, I think I won. I started to play the senior circuit in 35s and did well in Texas and did well against a few guys that were in the top handful in the nation then, and but then on and off just kind of played. I kind of played men's open all the way through probably 45, and then I've just played the kids and played around the club and local tournaments that we held. But yeah, I'm gonna definitely do it. Played again Saturday in our 5-0 league, and after 2 weeks of practice, felt like a totally different person. But it's fun to get out and compete. And yeah, the volleys are best part of my game historically, but adjusting to the vision has been an interesting thing. So now I have to read the ball a little differently, and I don't feel I'm able to close on it quite as quickly, not because of speed or anything, but just really vision. I mean, the vision is so important. And but I love the net. I mean, I loved the net when I was a kid. Nobody told me to go. I just that was my personality, and I love seeing players that just don't hesitate when a ball's in the middle of the court. And it is a shame. This generation is filled with even the people that think they're all court players are really two-zone players. They're red and yellow, and they really don't get into the net when they're so.
But yourself as a senior player, though, you obviously can't close in like you used to, right? You got to kind of hang back.
No, I mean, I really not. Yeah, just because of my eye, it's the speed. I don't feel really any slower. I feel like I can still move and cover overheads. That part of it isn't really an issue. I feel my body's in good shape. It's just adjusting the perception. But I've got I go to a couple different eye doctors that got me squared away, and they think they have a combination of things that I can wear with kind of a protective goggle that'll really help me to almost see it, because it's interesting. I've learned a lot about the eye. I'm going on instinct now. Primarily when I see a ball hit, it's like motor programming in my brain is what I'm reading and basing my perception of where the ball's going to go. And that's pretty much what it is. So it's really been fascinating. It's been good for me because I took so many things for granted, with two healthy eyes. My other eyes, fighter pilot vision still. So, but yeah, I mean, I love the net.
Tell us about your injury. What happened?
Detached retina. I didn't. I'm assuming it. I was playing out in our backyard and screwing around and slipped on a railroad tie and kind of hit my head. And I felt something really shift in my leg, and I had been injury free. It was summer of COVID, 2020.
I thought that was when your childhood friend Freddie Foreman knocked you out in the backyard. That's not true.
Yeah, that would have been Freddie's fantasy. But no, and then I was went to the court the next day and just thought, because I'd been banged around a little, I thought maybe I had a concussion a little bit because I was kind of, not seeing great out of that side. And then I turned for a ball on the court and it just went right by me. And I called the kid that is on our staff. His dad is the head of ophthalmology at UT Southwestern, a big hospital here. And he's one of the boys on our staff, Travis Bowman, who you've met, Steve, and who played at Wash U, national champ. And his dad got me in, and he said, "Welcome to middle age or old age." And I thought, well, yeah, it must be that. And then all of a sudden, he just got white in his face, and he opened the door and yelled for Dr. He. Is Dr. He still here? And that was when he found out I had a detached retina. And two pretty horrible surgeries. And then, but it's really, at this point, I mean, I'm really adjusted to it quite well. I'm seeing the ball. It's a miracle because the guy said I healed like Superman because they didn't know if I'd have any vision back. But I got it back to where it's, able to see somewhat. And I just got to get the depth perception part ironed out, and then I'll be good.
Oh,
so
that's great. Wash U reminds me, Roger Fulmer, he called me up. I got to call him back. But one thing, so much content on our website. The P's like to volley better than the J's. Perceiver versus Judger off the Myers-Briggs. There's an article by Vic Braden and Joel Trucker, made it all the way to the cover of Tennis Magazine. J's will learn to volley out of routine. P's will just randomly do it, but much more flexible. If there are any college coaches listening to this podcast, we have a gal here. She's athletic. Miron Mann said she has the best attitude of anybody he's ever met. That's pretty off the chart compliment. And she can really play from the net in. Got to really conquer the outside in backhand. But if any college coaches are listening, give me a call. Toughest thing about the toughest thing about playing serve and volley doubles is now finding a partner who can serve and volley. One of the reasons that, I'll just say this to get it in, one of the reasons that people don't volley is they're hearing this phrase over and over again, serve +1. 12 and under players, come on. They shouldn't be hearing that. Arching the back, tossing the ball way over their head. I mean, they're not really hitting an effective serve, but they can get it in because now they're swinging with the edge going up and, just going the wrong way. I mean, stay in the pocket, hit a backhand. But it is true that if you play really well in the backcourt, you're going to get more opportunities in the midcourt. If you play really well in the midcourt, you're going to get volleys and overheads. But Dave, thanks so much for doing this. I know really enjoy having you on, helping us out. Yvonne, thank you. Listeners.
Yep.
Tennis camps. We'll come back and talk about ground strokes and talk about volleys and overheads. But everybody, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, adios.
You as well.